All right, hi, I'm Charlotte Smith, and I'll be refuting Erica Barnett's claim that zoos are harmful. Zoos harm the animals that they hold captive. Her first claim is that animals suffer from having behavioral issues living in captivity. Second, animals die prematurely in zoos. And third, zoos kill animals they consider surplus. I would like to address her first claim, animals suffer having behavioral issues living in captivity. And I'm going to address her first quote that is from Jill Wenrick, a primatologist who is a professor at our school that I personally have as a teacher. And she uses about 7 sentences going on how their natural instinct to hunt, to look out for prey, to socialize and interact with other individuals cause them to do unnatural behavior like tearing out their hair or throwing feces. I'm not going to deny that that does happen in zoos, but her source, Jill Wenrick, is actually, I have her as a teacher, and she's an extremely biased kind of person with a very strong sense of keeping animals out of captivity. It's hard to take everything that she says completely to heart because she is on many committees that play active roles in keeping the animals safe out of habitats. She goes exploring all the time in Africa, keeping those animals out of captivity. So she has a huge factor in playing in keeping animals out of captivity, which gives her a really strong bias. She mentions that natural instinct to hunt, look for prey, to socialize and interact with other individuals causes these, except 2 of the things, like to socialize and interact with other individuals, is what animals do in zoos. They usually have multiple companions in their cages or sanctuaries that they live in, so it's hard to say that those 2 factors are what causes them to rip out their hair or pull out the feces. Or throw the feces, I mean. I also found a quote by Michael Clinchy, an ecological stress professor, and he says that in the wild, animals have an extreme high level of stress because, first of all, they're constantly trying to stay alive and keep away from getting eaten by prey, and they always have to keep on their toes to find their next meal. So he says chronic physical challenges such as shortage of food, famine, can introduce psychological stress, acute physical crisis that either the prey has to survive or does not. Other demographic processes such as reproduction, giving birth, and rearing young is extremely hard on animals in the wild and causes them a lot of stress trying to keep just their one animal fed and themselves fed. Or death from malnutrition or disease occur long time scales, and ecologicalists have traditionally assumed that these processes are affected by chronic physical challenges. So it shows that animals also have an extreme high level of stress in the wild, not just trying to stay alive, but trying to have their next meal, which in zoos, they feed them and they keep them alive as best they can. The next claim I would like to address is animals die prematurely in zoos. She uses the quote, she uses 2 examples about 2 African or Asian elephants that died in a zoo prematurely than what they would have survived in the wild. It's from an article in National Geographic, and in that article there's actual counter argument in that exact argument that's by West, co-author of a paper in the journal Zoo Biology, showing the opposite, that zoo elephants live just as long in zoos as they do in the wild. He said that within the last decade, accredited facilities have made huge improvements in the care of captivity by providing better nutrition to combat obesity, as well as environmental enrichment activities that can reduce stress. So zoos commonly have built, since this article was published in 2008, he's stating that typically anti-zoo critics throw in our face that things of the community have already identified as issues we need to work on. So again, since it was in 2008, it clearly showed that they have already made improvements. It's 8 years later, or no, 10 years later. Yeah, 10 years later, zoos have definitely made improvements. They've made their captivities extreme, especially for large animals like elephants. They've made them huge. If you've ever been to San Diego Zoo or LA Zoo, the captivities are huge for elephants. They have toys for them. They have plenty of food, and they also have other elephants in there with them. Also, in the animals die prematurely in zoos, she uses the food at which they give animals to cause them health problems, and you get the nutrition that they would in the wild. That's also stated by Jill Wenrick, primatologist, the professor here at school, so some of it may not be completely factual because she is a primatologist. She doesn't know what zoologists do. She doesn't really know the food that each animal gets in the zoo. I did research on it, and the zoo, the Joke Jobber, PhD nutritionist who works at the Rotterdam Zoo, his quote is, zoo nutritionists analyze each animal's diet from its native habitat, including the vitamin and mineral content. Then they try to come up with a replacement that has the same properties. The beef that is fed to the lions, for example, needs calcium added, because in the wild, lions eat their bones of the prey, which contain a lot of calcium. The commissionary provides large bones for the big cats to chew on. It's not that the diet is a problem for the animals, it's probably because they don't get to release all the energy that they did just eat from hunting or something like that. So a lot of their energy is used to hunt for their food, and then so it makes sense why they get a little fat, because they don't have exactly the running ability and hunting ability. The diets that they use, zoologists are extremely particular about what they feed their animals and have a very good knowledge on what they feed them. Also, the meat that animals do eat is bush meat, and it's illegal, so zoos have to substitute for that kind of meat. And lastly, her point about that zoos kill what they consider surplus animals. I can't deny the fact that zoos do kill surplus animals, because there's no articles that say that either. I mean, it's fact. I'm just stating that her evidence could have been more. She used one example about lion cubs being killed in a Swedish zoo, when I think would have made her claim a lot more undeniable if she had multiple accounts of when zoos killed animals. Thank you.
Okay, we got to go quickly here. The information on, first of all, the structure is easy to follow, so no problem there. The first point, you kind of criticize the advocate's research, the potential bias of the researcher. I'm not exactly sure the fact that somebody is in the field studying animals and is an opponent of having them in captivity means that they're biased. There's probably a reason that they think that that's a particular problem. The notion that this is ignores the other perspective, I think that's the more important issue. And later on you make a criticism that says she's not a zoologist, she's a primatologist, which means that she's used to looking at the life of animals in the wild as opposed to looking at the life of animals in captivity, and there may in fact be problems as a consequence of that narrow perspective. I think that's maybe the better argument there. I thought that your information from the same articles suggesting that there are other issues that are important, that makes sense. For example, the level of, well, I guess the Clinchy argument wasn't really the same article. That was the National Geographic in the other section that was from the same article. But you had this information that suggested that there are other stresses that they are subject to in the wild. I thought that was a perfectly reasonable alternative. And then on the second argument, when you're talking about premature deaths, that's where you have the same information come from the same source that they've got that suggests the exact opposite conclusion to what the advocate's presenting. I think that's effective in making your argument there. Sometimes you're not always responding to the evidence that the advocate presented on this particular point, but the counterclaims seem applicable here. The idea of the zoo nutritionist specializing on that, you need to maybe probably the commissary is the word I think that you're looking for in one spot. The notion that they have to make adjustments for the animals in captivity, I think that that's a good argument. Again, I don't remember all of the information that the advocate presented on this particular point, so there's not much reference to their argument there. This is all mostly counterclaim. On the third issue, I think that you make a mistake here. You basically are making an evaluative statement about their argument and suggesting, here's how you could fix that argument, which is not what you want to be doing. I think the argument, if it is true and there's no dispute about it, then you need to minimize it. The likelihood that surplus animals are going to be killed, maybe that happens rarely. It only happens in limited circumstances. If there is, for example, no alternative, you don't want to deny that zoos maybe put down some animals that are excess, but is that their first option? It probably isn't, and I think that that's probably true, but you kind of just say, well, they'd have had a stronger argument if they used some other examples. Yeah, I don't think that helps you that much. Okay, thank you.